Well, good morning and welcome to today's webinar. This is the third in a series of 4 Lutheran Service Builder training webinars. Today our topic is presentations and presentation formats. Once again, I am your host, Peter Frank. I am the Senior Manager of Marketing Technology at Concordia Publishing House. I do a number of things here, from working with our e-commerce team to working with our software developers, and I do a lot of marketing as well. So I get my hands in a lot of different projects, but one of my favorite projects is Lutheran Service Builder. That's why I'm here today, sharing as much as I can about how to do presentations and presentation formats. So my contact information is on the screen. My email, at least, is there. I normally put my office phone number, and I am in the office right now. But during this coronavirus time period, I'm not here every day. I'm just coming in for the webinars. There's really nobody else around in the building. There's a handful of people who are working in our distribution center, but it's pretty quiet here. So I get to take advantage of the strong internet connection as I present. So email is the best way to get a hold of me. All of my phone calls are forwarding to voicemail, which tell you to email me. So please feel free to reach out. All right, so today we're talking about Lutheran Service Builder. If this is the first webinar you're watching, I want to explain a little bit about Lutheran Service Builder. I also know that many of you will be watching after the fact, watching the recording after the fact. So if this is the first one you picked up because you're looking for presentations, well, let me tell you a little bit about Lutheran Service Builder. It is a web-based software that allows churches to quickly and easily plan services, create the custom bulletin interiors, the service folders. It allows you to export presentations for display during worship. And also, it allows you to export playlists if you are subscribed to Concordia Organist. Finally, all of those allow you to conform with copyright requirements because the licenses that we offer will allow you to legally use the different hymns and the different liturgy and allow us to know who's using it so that we can pay the royalties. So there's a lot of information that goes on behind the scenes. Lutheran Service Builder makes it easy. You just pick what you need and run with it. So that is what Lutheran Service Builder is. Now, I mentioned before, this is the third in a series of 4 training sessions. We had service planning and global search on Monday, or session 1. We had bulletins and bulletin formats yesterday, session 2. Both of those went longer than I planned. I'm hoping to stay on time today. We'll see. Today is presentation and presentation formats. And then tomorrow, the big one, my worship resources and other add-ons. It's amazing how many questions we've had that really point to that one. So I have extended that one to be about 2 hours. So we'll talk about timing and stuff in a minute, but there's been so many questions I want to get them answered. So tomorrow will be a little bit longer. But today we're talking about presentation and presentation formats. There's a lot of overlap between yesterday and today. So I'm not going to cover everything I did yesterday because that's bulletins, but you'll see a lot of similarities and I'll refer back to it. All right, I'm getting ahead of myself. A few housekeeping items before we begin. First off, I'm planning on 75 minutes for presentation. The last 2 days it went about 90. So I understand you guys are busy. If you have to step away, that's why we record these. The last portion of our presentation, and where I extended it beyond the last 2 days, is our 15 minutes for question and answers. So we extended it past that time so that I could answer those, but the presentation went about the full 90 minutes. Now, you are all muted as attendees, or at least I hope you are. And it looks like everybody's in there. The first day I had some noise coming in. I'm not sure what that was, but if I do hear something, that is not intentional. If you hear something besides me, that's not intentional either. So there's so many people here today that we have to keep everybody muted. Otherwise, we'll be talking on top of each other. But you can still ask questions, and I'd encourage you to do so. So there is a chat feature within our GoToWebinar platform. You can go ahead and enter your questions in the chat, and I will do my best to answer all of them during the Q&A time. But knowing how many people we have and knowing what a limited time period we have, one of my associates, Tim, is on with us. He will be answering questions. Tim is on our software support team. He's got a lot of experience with Lutheran Service Builder. He'll be able to answer questions as we go. So that way I don't have to pause the webinar and keep going. Now, some of the questions I've been seeing are being asked a few minutes before I answer them. So just know that if you ask a question, you may actually get the answer in a few minutes based on the presentation. And finally, Like I mentioned before, we are recording this. This recording will be shared after the fact. On Monday when I did it, the recording took way too long to process. I wasn't able to get it out Monday. Yesterday went very smoothly, and so I was able to get it out yesterday afternoon. I send a link afterwards to the recording, and it also gives you the chance to sign up for the subsequent webinars. So my hope is to get that out to you still today, but if it's not today, it'll be tomorrow. And no matter what, you can go into our resource center, and as soon as it's available there, you can watch it. So that is resources.concordiatechnology.org. But again, I'll be emailing this to you. All right. So I always make assumptions. They're pretty straightforward based on what you've already heard this week. I assume you understand the basics of Lutheran worship. We're not going to get into the nitty-gritty details of worship. I assume you are subscribed to Lutheran Service Builder and the LSB hymn license. If you're not, you can still get some help. There's a lot of good things that you can do in the free trial of Lutheran Service Builder. We're presently offering a free promotional license during a limited promotional license during this coronavirus pandemic. So that if you're using that, then that's like you're subscribed. It's a free subscription for a limited time period. So I'm assuming you're using that. I'm also assuming you're using the online version. That is a key. I'm only showing the online version. If you're using Lutheran Service Builder 1 or Lutheran Service Builder 2, this does not apply to you. There are going to be a lot of things here that are probably pretty cool compared to what you're using right now. We've made a lot of upgrades, but it's not going to apply to you. So I'd encourage you to consider upgrading. Upgrading is a free process. It's the same price as what you're paying right now. We may need to adjust the beginning and end of your license agreement date, which may have a prorated fee or credit, but it's the same annual pricing. And finally, I'm assuming you attended the first 2 training webinars in this series. Not a requirement. You can still get a lot out of today. In fact, most of it will make sense even if you haven't attended those first 2. I'm just going to talk like you have. So that's my assumption. But if you're not on the online version and you have no idea what this is, you can start your free trial at lutheranservicebuilder.com and follow along from home. And I encourage you to do that. The things that we are doing today, you could create a service, you could create a presentation in different presentation formats, follow along. If you don't like it, you can delete them afterwards. It won't mess up your account at all. So whether you're on a trial or you're on the paid version, I encourage you to follow along with me. But now is the fun part where you get to tell me about yourself. So I've got a few poll questions. I've been curious to see if our answers change as we go through this week. So these are the same questions as before. We'll go through them pretty quickly. You guys are all getting really good at this. The first one is asking you to let me know what your primary role is. I had a question beforehand from Michael about what if there's 2 people watching? Well, you could pick and choose maybe the person who registered or the person who uses Service Builder the most. I wish I could set it so you could pick multiple options, but I just don't have that capability within our platform here. So looks like we're a little bit different than the previous couple days. We're still, I'll let the votes come in a little bit longer, but looks like we've got a few more pastors and church musicians than the last few days. Fewer church administrators, and I think that makes sense. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and close the voting, and I'll share this with you. So the last couple of days, we had a higher percentage of administrators, and it's still by far number 1. But I would guess that today, what often happens is that the administrator creates the bulletin and shares it with somebody else who does the presentation. I know that happens at a lot of churches that I'm familiar with. So I wonder if that's the case here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and hide that. I've had a number of questions come up. You went away. Oh, yeah, I went away when the poll question came up. Bill, it says you can't select, and Joan, it won't let you fix. I apologize. Again, this is our webinar platform. There's only so much I can do, but thank you for trying. It's not the end of the world if you can't answer that. In fact, these next 2 will go pretty quickly because I'm guessing this won't change. Are you currently using Lutheran Service Builder in your congregation? I'm curious to see if we have any newbies. Sometimes that's what we have happen, is that people attend these training webinars to see if they want to use Lutheran Service Builder. So it looks like the majority, around 80-something, 83, 81%, it's continually shifting, are using it right now. So that makes good sense. All right, I'll close that. I'm not gonna, it's 81% yes, 10% no, and 8% no, but planning to soon. And we'll jump right into our last one. We're starting to get into some of the more advanced features of Lutheran Service Builder. So I'm curious what your skill level is, what you consider it to be. Have you kind of one-upped your skills this week while you've been learning more? Do you feel more confident? Maybe the start of the week you thought, I don't know as much as I'd like to. And then as we've been going through it, you thought, yeah, I actually did know that. Yeah, I think so. That change is showing here. As I'll go ahead and share this in just a few seconds. Let everybody get their vote in. Yeah, I don't know why it's not letting people. We haven't had that before. I'm really sorry about that. I've noticed a lower percentage overall, so something's going on today where you can't select it. I apologize if that's happening to you. You can start to see we're shifting upwards. More people are in advanced than before. More people are in intermediate. So that's good. I think that shows me at least that this is helping you. Or maybe it's just a problem with the webinar polls and you're not able to answer it as a newbie. I apologize if that's the case. All right, well, let's continue going on. At least you can hear me, I think. Yeah, I've got a number of people who can't answer the poll. I'm so sorry. Well, continuing forward, the training goal for today. By the end of the day, you'll know how to prepare a complete presentation and export it from Lutheran Service Builder. The exporting part's pretty easy. There's a few complications that we'll talk about with presentations, but for the most part, the preparing, the formats, that's the real meat of the presentation. But that outline today is to go and insert, select, or remove different elements, change how they appear. We'll talk about differences between bulletins and presentations. We'll customize the presentation format. That's a key part of this. That's where you can have a lot of fun. That's where your creativity can really shine, but you want to be careful not to be too creative. And then we'll export. We'll talk about PowerPoint versus Media Shout and the like. All right, so let's go ahead and jump in, get started. We are back to our calendar view. I just want to make sure you guys are seeing that. I have my audience view here. It looks like we're in decent shape. Now we're going to do things a little bit differently than what we have done previously. You see, third Sunday of Easter is what we've been working on. We created a bulletin from this service plan yesterday, and then we made a bunch of tweaks to it as a training example. Well, if I was to go jump into a presentation right now, all of the adjustments that we made yesterday will be in place. And that's part of this process because while I think a lot of our users will create the bulletin first and then the presentation, many of you aren't doing that. In fact, many of you are only doing a presentation. And so I want to show that first because that has a lot of different functionality or a lot of different UI, user interface from this view. The functionality really does the same thing. So I want to show it from scratch, and then I'll talk through how it works if you do the bulletin first. I think you'll learn, everybody will learn a lot this way. Whereas if I just went straight into it from the bulletin, I think there'll be some missing steps. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to create a new service for the same week, and we're just going to call this 2. Third Sunday of Easter 2. I know, really original. All right, now my readings and everything are the same. We went through this whole service planning process the other day. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add those same hymns to my service plan as yesterday. And this is a good review. I did this beforehand and I was like, well, I'll delete that. I'll show it live. The easiest way to do this is to go through and I save my hymn numbers. All I have to do is type in the hymn number. I just type those 3 digits in and add the hymns. Now we had a question yesterday and I think I answered it maybe even a couple times, but it's always a good refresher. When you are adding hymns, after you select one, you have to hit this add hymn button again, or click that add hymn button again. And that's a little not intuitive, but there's a good reason for it because otherwise you wouldn't be able to say, are you adding a hymn or are you changing a hymn if you just click one after the next. So there's probably some improvements we can make to that. I don't know what those are, but I know that once you know what you're doing, it's pretty easy to remember, oh, I gotta add the hymn. And then we went with the Divine Service setting 1 as our order of service. And the additional rite that we put in here was the farewell and Godspeed to a Lutheran teacher or other certified church worker. So I put that as the additional rite. We don't need to worry about notes or anything. So in just a few seconds, we are back to where we were at the start of yesterday. And rather than going in and clicking Prepare Bulletin, we're going to click Prepare Presentation. So I'll click that button right there. Now you'll notice this takes a little bit longer to load. The reason is that it is splicing or cutting. Oops, I apologize. I don't have all my notifications turned off. Let me do that real quick so you guys don't hear things as I go through. Well, I thought it was all. I always think I'm prepared and then I find one thing that I didn't and it starts making noise on me. All right, well, I think we'll be fine right now. So I've got the presentation view up and it took a little bit longer to load. The reason is that unlike the bulletin view, it is critical that what is on each page fit on each page and move to the next and show you what that's going to look like. The bulletin, there's tweaking afterwards. When you export it to your word processor, you're going to make some adjustments. There may be things that you add that change where the page breaks are, or you may see the page break looks a little funny and you need to adjust it. Well, with the presentation view, it's a little bit more important because when you export it, each one of these things is an individual block. It doesn't flow from page to page like it does in Microsoft Word. So we have to go through a process of programmatically estimating where we should split each page. And I'll tell you, we don't always get it right. We have spent a lot of time working on it, but it doesn't always work out for us because it's a complicated process. The other thing that adds into it is everybody has different preferences. So for example, and we'll go through this in more detail, but I think this is a key part to talk about right at the beginning. You see here, we have the invocation. There's a lot of white space on that page. And one could say, well, the exhortation could easily fit on there. And they'd be right. I mean, you look at this, each one takes up less than half of the slide. But how do we know that you want it on the same slide? You might want it on separate slides. So we have to make some judgment calls. Now there's some things we can do across the presentation from a default setting, but that splicing, that splitting it up is a lot harder to make judgment calls on by default. So I wanted to throw that out there right at the beginning before I forgot, because that's a very important thing that happens in the background. You see the end results, but there's a lot that went into figuring out how to split it up. And again, we may not always get it right. It is a programmatic experience and individual people are so much smarter than a computer. So there's that right off the bat. But let's go through the UI. This UI will be pretty similar, the user interface. I want to try to make sure to describe my acronyms. So when you see this on the left-hand side, you see your different slides, and on the right-hand side, the bigger portion of the screen, that is the zoomed in view to the slide. So it's just like a PowerPoint presentation where you see everything you need on the left-hand side, and you've got a lot to go through. You don't have to go through it all individually every time, but I would recommend until you get familiar with how it presents itself, that you are very familiar, you click on each one. All right, so, we just had somebody who said, I'm gonna pause here a second. I've got a number of questions. Yeah, where there's some noise in the background. There's, and some people can't see me. If you are having trouble seeing me, go ahead and put a note in there. If you're having trouble seeing my screen, put a note in there as well. And if you, if everything's fine, don't worry about it. You can let it go. I'm assuming that it's fine. I'm thinking that this might just be a few individual issues. All right. With that in mind, I'm going to continue on. Sorry, I hate to be distracted during this, but I want to make sure everybody can see things. So in the user interface, we've got the standard things that we had before. We've got our document view, and we call it document just to keep it consistent. It's really your presentation view. But you have an export button, where you can export to PowerPoint or Media Shout 6. We'll talk about that in a bit. You have your presentation formats here. Then you have your order of service, your liturgy. Now, unlike yesterday where we had a web view right there and to the right of it, you don't have that today. There's no web view on the presentation view. The web view is brand new on the bulletins. And so you may not, you may see that in the future. We're getting feedback to see how people use it. I'll be curious to see if anybody wants a web version of the presentation view, and if so, how you plan to use it. All right, then we have the insert tab here. And the insert allows you to add different elements to your service. Now, I meant to cover that in more detail yesterday, and I simply ran out of time. We'll talk about that a little bit. It's, I think, more important on the presentation view than it is on the bulletin view, but we'll talk about that in a few minutes. Then on the far right, you have your sub-navigation where for this service, you can switch between your different management tools. You can view your propers, you can set your service plan, prepare your bulletin. Now we're in prepare playlist, and then prepare presentation. And then tomorrow we'll talk about the playlist. And then you've got your settings up here like normal. So it's pretty familiar, there's not too much different. Then on the left-hand side where you have your slide previews, you can click on one of those, and all of a sudden you get a third tab. This will describe what the view is. So like right here, we have our heading tab. The heading tab is because this element is a heading. And this one here is a hymn. You see it changes the name, whatever that element is. So actually, each one of these slides is an element. So that goes back to what I was talking about before. If we go here to like invocation, for one, we would never know if both of these, if you had two on one slide, how to manage those. But secondly, we really need to be able to say, we wouldn't know if you wanted them both on one slide or another, but it also makes it very clear that when you click on this slide, you're going up to this invocation here. That tab refers to this entire slide. Now, again, there's a lot of schools of thought on this. It's hard when you are managing dozens of slides in a presentation. I've been doing a lot of video streaming at my church, and we're switching between slides and video. And so there's things that we don't want to show on the slide because I'd rather show the video at that time. For example, the readings of scripture. It's important, there's a lot of value in listening to scripture being read to you. And it's easy to be distracted when you have it right in front of you. And so we've made the call to not show the readings in scripture while it's being read. So we don't need to export those. A lot of these rubrics like stand. When our pastor says, please stand if you are able, well, you don't need to see that on the screen if you're listening to it. That's pretty straightforward. So there's a number of reasons why you may not need all of these slides. It's different when you're physically in worship though as well. So if you want to show that, you can, when you're physically in worship and you have the presentation up there as well as seeing what's going on, you do want it. So there's a lot of reasons why you might want things in and might want things out. And so we put it all out there as individual elements based on the default settings of the presentation and let you choose. All right, so we are at a heading right now. Just like on the bulletin view, you can click in here and start typing things. So maybe you want that ampersand instead of and. Hymn of invocation. When you click on this hymn, you get to select your hymn just like in the bulletin. You see on the search bar here, I've got my creative worship, which is unique to me. It's a separate subscription. Then I have my service plan. I have my suggested hymns. All of that is just the same. It's the same thing you see in the service plan view. It's the same thing you see in the bulletin view. The only difference from this in the service plan is that you have the final service plan here. So we planned out those 5 hymns just a few minutes ago, and we want the hymn of invocation. So I click on Lord, open now my heart to hear. I have now selected that hymn. That element changes. I get the title and the number, and I get each stanza. There's 3 stanzas here. Now my tab up at the top has also changed. and I have a couple new settings. We'll go through some of the standard stuff. We have the move, we have the delete. The move says I want to just essentially pick this up and drop it in. Now, if I uncheck move, I can actually drag and drop it around. That's a lot harder on the presentation view because you have to drag and while holding, scroll. I recommend using this move. It's going to make you a lot happier because if you wanted to move this hymn way down here, you're going to have to drag. It does work. It doesn't work really easily. Yeah, that's why we have move. Click move and then pick your destination. You see that blue line there shows where to do it. You can also just delete it. I don't recommend doing that if you wanted to have it in your service, but that makes it really easy to delete. You have your stanza selector here, and you can say, well, we're only going to do 1 and 3. And as soon as you uncheck it, it'll remove whatever stanza you don't want. And also add it in when you select it back. Now, you have a few different options in terms of how this element is displayed. It defaults to text based on my format, but I can switch it to the melody. If I click melody, it'll take a second. There we go. Now, a word of caution about putting melody on the screen. It is a lot harder to sing from a screen than it is from a bulletin. And a lot of it has to do with the width of it. So we're using the same images that we would use in a bulletin. The problem is that your size of your document, if your presentation size and your paper size are usually different. Usually your presentation size is more of a landscape and your printed is more of a portrait. And so your aspect has changed, which means that this is wider and smaller. So I could see a benefit in like splitting it in half and seeing it that way so that you could zoom in more, but then you're gonna have more slides. And we would also have to re-engrave everything, and it's still not that great of an experience. So my recommendation is to just go with the text. Now, a lot of people disagree with that, and it's just a perspective. It's just an opinion. So I can share my opinion because I am on, my volume's turned on and I'm not muted. You will have a different opinion. That doesn't mean one is right or wrong. There's a lot of benefits to having the melody up there. Part of my opinion is based on my background of not being able to read music. So for me, it doesn't really matter. But for you who can read music, it's a lot different. So I just want to caution you to think through all of that. Now, the other option is you can just say none, and it shows the title and the number, and you invite everybody to open up their hymnal. Well, that's not always a great solution either. When my kids were young, we visited my in-laws' church, and they had the screen up, which was fantastic because I was holding this happened multiple times when my son and my daughter were babies. I'd be holding them and they'd have portions of the service up on the presentation. And so I wouldn't have to fumble with a bulletin or a hymnal, which was great. Not all of the service was up there. So like if I had this where I went to a hymn and it said, okay, now open up your hymnal, and I'm holding my baby, it's really hard to juggle. So I encourage you, if you're using a presentation, you make it as easy as possible for people to never have to pick up a bulletin unless they'd like to. So again, that's my opinion, but this is how you do those different things. You have your text and your melody and your none up there at the top. So I prefer text, but we'll look at melody a little bit more later on. All right, next on the far left, and I probably should go left to right, but I think it's better to understand what these other things are doing first before you get to this one. This basically says, where do you want the caption to be displayed? Do you want the caption on all pages? See, as we go through, the caption is there. Do you want it on just the first? So you have it on this slide and then not on the next ones. Do you want it a separate? So do we want a separate slide for the caption and then move into the stanzas? Or do you not want to show it at all and you just jump right into the stanzas? That again is your call, but at least this gives you that visual of how it's being used. All right, we'll keep going. Next up, we have a rubric. All you can do is change the rubric. Please stand. There's not much else to do with it. Another rubric. Now, the sign of the cross may be made by all in remembrance of their baptism. This is printed in the liturgy and the hymnal. That's why we include it here. There's not really a good time to show this, again, in my opinion, because by the time you read that, the people who are familiar with making the sign of the cross will be done. And I don't know, it fits better when it is an optional thing to look at in a bulletin and a printed material than on here. So if you're in agreement with me, you would just go up here and click delete, and that one will be gone. And now it's just gone from here. It's not gone from Divine Service Setting 1. You'll see it again next time. All of that stuff will stay in place. All right, now we got the invocation. Again, we've got the option here for your caption. Now, we were able to turn captions on and off on bulletins, but in the presentation, you have more than that. You can turn it on or off. In this case, it doesn't matter whether it's all, first, separate, or none, because it's just one slide. Now, you could do separate, but I don't really like that. There's not that much going on here. So I would say just do it under first. Now, the other thing that's different between doing a bulletin, in the bulletin, I recommended not necessarily having a caption every time because it would lengthen your pages. But on the presentation, you're doing one slide per element anyways. This is a good training tool. In fact, you could always add additional explanations on here when it's a short element like invocation. Now, again, that's your call, but you've got that option. I would not just say invocation here unless you don't really have a response. And of course, you do have a response here. Now, another thing when we're on invocation, on the far right-hand side, well, let's go to exhortation. That was an example I used yesterday. Same kind of options up here, but under exhortation, you might want to use a different exhortation. So this one's from Divine Service Setting 4. Now, this is a little bit longer. It's different than what is the default. And you can see here, if you go, now you've got your caption on both. This is where you may want to just do the caption on the first one. You see, now exhortation is only showing up there. All right, we'll keep going on. So here's some more rubrics. Here's the confession of sins. Now, we talked about this yesterday, but I'm going to repeat myself. With the confession of sins, that's pretty standard. But within Divine Service Setting 1, you have two options, and probably in all of the Divine Services. You can either choose here to go absolution or declaration of grace. Declaration of grace is typically done by a vicar or someone who is not ordained. And so this is how these option groups look. You still have that blue bar. You still have that little blue arrow that shows whether it's open or closed. Now here, we make it a grayed out slide to say this one's not active. As soon as you click on it, it is active and you can see it's darker and the other one becomes inactive. And so that helps you know what is truly in your presentation versus what your options are. So it's the same thing that you have up like in the exhortation. As you click on this element, you could also go and choose something else from a different order of service. All right, we are going to keep moving on. Let's go. We'll stick with absolution today. Now we go through. Here's another heading. Now we're in the introit. You can see here that you've got another option group, but just like yesterday in the bulletin, in the option group, you can go to Psalms, but this specific element has some more things to it. Here you have your same kind of things, caption, alt text, none, but now you've got pointing. Pointing is if you are chanting it, and you can include it or choose to remove it. And then you could also include a psalm tone. That puts it up at the beginning. You'll see here how it starts to split it. We don't want to split it in an inappropriate way, but it starts to look a little awkward there. So just be careful with how you do that. All right, now you also have the template. Now this one's not really good here. We'll look at the templates when we get down to, the only thing about the template is you, for here that's good, is you can mark who is saying that. So there's the congregation versus like the default, which is just the leader. Or maybe you are doing the congregation, everybody's doing it, and you don't have it all bolded because you want to highlight the Gloria Patri. Okay, so We'll keep going down here. We'll keep that introit in place. Here's the Kyrie. You can see how it goes back and forth. Now this one here, you also have the option to sing. So you've got the melody option, and then you've got the text and melody. And so you can see how that looks. Doesn't look too bad. I think most people will be familiar with it, but this is where having that music gives that indication we are singing. But if you do the music on the liturgy, the melody on the liturgy, but not the hymns, then that might confuse people. So these are decisions that you have to make. All right, we'll continue down. There's the Gloria in Excelsis. Again, you have the different option there for this is the feast. That option group remains. Oops. Now you have the salutation and the collect. Well, this is the collect for Easter 3. Well, you might want it to say salutation and collect. You can change that by default with your presentation format. If you go in here, oops, I just put a dash in there, slash, I meant to hit enter. There you go, I just put enter, salutation and collect of the day. You could say salutation and collect for the, oops, third Sunday of Easter. You have that option to change that. Now you can't actually change the text here. We'll talk about that tomorrow. But what you'll notice is that as this dropped down a line, I now have a second slide here. Well, that's not bad. That's a good thing that it has it there. But if I was to just have my one on the title or in the first slide, if I have my caption just on the first slide, now I have a second slide with just amen. This is where it starts to get a little iffy. We are trying to automatically slice it, but I think you can probably see here that there's enough room for the amen at the bottom. And so we don't always get it right. It's all programmatic based on pixels, literally pixels. We are counting pixels to say which slide should it go. And because of the margins, there's enough margin here and enough line height, it doesn't programmatically fit there. And so these are the things you'll have to watch for. All right, we'll continue down. There's another rubric. And now here's a reading. So the reading, this is the standard response, which just has, this is the word of the Lord, thanks be to God. But you might want to have a template that, let's go down here. A reading, this is from the daily office, where it has the call and response at the beginning, or at least the introduction, a reading from Acts chapter 2. Now, the lector may say that regardless, but if you want it on the screen, that's where that template comes in. And you've got some other ones that may not be appropriate, like you wouldn't want to say this is the gospel. In fact, what would you even say? The Holy Gospel according to St. Acts, the 2nd chapter. Please don't do that. That is incorrect. But again, it's all programmatic, so keep that in mind. We could spend a lot of time contextualizing every possible iteration of it, but sometimes it just requires a little bit of human thinking to solve that. And in most cases, that wouldn't be missed. All right, we'll continue down here. So this one has an antiphon, verse 5. We've talked about having an antiphon, I forget what the phrase was, maybe something like antiphonization of our Psalms. This is something we're looking at in the future, but right now we just reference verse 5. And so how you use that antiphon where you're repeating verse 5, that's something that you would have to manually put in there. All right, so another option group. We're gonna keep going down. We're doing okay on time right now. Here's the Alleluia in verse. And I just wanted to highlight down here, you get this red triangle where it says the track is usually omitted during the Easter season. So we have some contextualization for the season of Easter. And especially during Lent, you'll see that more and more. All right, now we have our gospel reading. And you'll notice that the words of Christ are in red. That is part of the presentation format. We'll look at that later on in case maybe your background color doesn't go well with red. You may want to turn that off. So there's some advantages to having it. There's also some disadvantages depending on your colors. All right, we'll keep going down here. We've got a hymn of the day. we'll go in and select our hymn of the day, and we have those same kind of options as before. All right, sermon. Just like any other caption or header or rubric, you can just go in and type in sermon title. All right, now yesterday I forgot to bring this up. This is part of the insert things. We got down to the sermon, and at my church we do a children's message. We actually do the children's message before the readings. I know at some churches they don't do that, and I don't want to get into the discussion of whether you should or shouldn't. But if you want to, this is where you could go and insert something. So we could say insert a caption right here. This is what we do right before the readings, and put children's message. Oops, yeah. You'll notice there's a little bit of delay. That's just it catching up and saving it. So if you wanted to put a children's message, you can do that. If you wanted to include a different element, maybe you want another hymn, you could just go and insert hymn and say, we'll sing a hymn before we go to the children's message. We'll go in, we'll look for the hymn. We don't have this hymn planned out. Oops. Jesus loves me. Maybe that's after the children's message. Well, this is where you can go and move it, put it there. So these are how you bring in different elements. You'll notice there's readings, prayers, propers, other elements, you know, rubrics, headings, captions, and then also the rights. We'll look at rights in a little bit. But if you want to bring those elements in, that's how you do it. All right, continuing down, we've got our, go past the sermon. Here's our creed, Nicene Creed. And again, you have an option group. Hopefully you're getting the hang of this. We're starting to repeat a number of different options here. Here is our prayer of the church. Now I mentioned this yesterday, I'll mention it again today. There is a service called, well, service isn't the right word. I say subscription called Let Us Pray. Let Us Pray are the prayer of the church published by or produced by the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod at the synodical headquarters. They are shared on their website. We partner with them to convert them into a subscription within Builder that you can sign up to for free. You can choose to automatically place those prayers of the church into your service, and that's what's happening here. You can see on the right-hand side, I have Easter 3 on April 26, 2020. It automatically puts that in. Now, if you don't subscribe to that, you're just going to see prayer of the church, and you might want to go and look through our different options here and plug it in. But I recommend signing up for Let Us Pray. There's something really cool about having these prayers already written, and they're the same prayers that are being prayed elsewhere. Now, you can always make modifications. You can't just go and type this in, but you can do that in your PowerPoint presentation. You could do a custom element. That's again for tomorrow. You've got some options there. But this subscription allows you to not have to type out your own prayers each week, unless you want to. All right, we've got some more rubric, or another rubric. Sit, offering, stand, offertory, and now we move into the service of the sacrament. Whoops, scrolled too far. All right, I'm not going to go through all of these because again, we have just things we've already covered before. Option groups, now we have like the Lord's Prayer there. Let me actually suggest something. There is a hymn version of the Lord's Prayer, and if you wanted to sing it rather than pray it, you could put that in right here. And I think it might just be called Our Father. I should have looked that up beforehand. Good, we've got some questions coming in here. Thank you to Tim for answering all of those. Whoops, I should probably type that in right. All right, so it looks like it was not under the Lord's Prayer. We'll search for Our Father. This gives me a chance to pause too. Yeah, every time I stream, I present our search is much slower. I don't know why that is. This one had a lot. I should have done hashtag hymns. We're going to forego that right now. That was just kind of a side quest that I didn't need to have. All right, so we'll continue down on the left-hand side. We're almost done with having our order of service in place. Distribution. Now here's some more things for communion. And like I talked yesterday, you may not want to have this here. Like here, the take, eat, this is the true body of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, given to death for your sins. That is great to say, but that is said at the altar, at the Lord's table. And so you typically are not looking up at a screen while you are saying that. So it's part of the liturgy, so we include it, but you may not want it. And so we could say, we'll just delete that part. And some of these other ones here, we're going to delete this rubric. Oops. It's going a little bit slow. I'm jumping around too many places. So pick and choose what you want. You're making the changes as appropriate. You've got your different distribution hymns here. We planned out some of those yesterday. At the Lamb's High Feast we sing. And it puts it in with those different stanzas. Again, this one has a lot of stanzas. We may just do, 1, 3, 8. Oh, there we go. So you can see those. We'll put another one in. Eat this bread. All right. I just want to get this into a nice final presentation mode. The last thing on here that I want to show, oh yeah, one more hymn to add in, but I want to show this insert right. So remember we added a right to the service plan. And just like in the bulletin, it adds it potentially where you might want it to go. And it puts it in this green box, and you can either insert it or dismiss it. If you dismiss it, then you're saying, all right, I planned this, we're not going to do it. Well, that's probably not the best way to do it. If we say insert right, it'll put it right where we want it. No pun intended. Oops. And there it is, right before the benediction. That's where we suggest you put it. That's not the software suggesting it. We actually had our editorial team go and choose the placement of each individual rite and where it should go in the liturgy. So if you want to move it, you can move it. You also have the option to display or hide the contents. In most cases with rites, you would choose to hide it or not display it. But if you wanted to do this before communion, you could move it all the way up here and do it right after the offertory. So again, that's your call. There's recommendations, but you're the one who's controlling this order of service. All right, and then the hymn to depart. There we go. All right. The last thing on here, and this is important, there's an acknowledgments tab or slide. This is where it shows your copyright information and what's used. You'll see it throughout with the hymns, but it's important to have that last one up there for legal reasons. So please don't remove any of those things. There's no good reason to remove it. You can change how it appears through a format, but you really do need to display that. All right, so we've kind of gone through this. We're looking decent on time. What I want to go is talk about what we just did was we created an order of service, but we didn't create the order of service from scratch. We created the order of service from a liturgy. We started with a liturgy and we moved it into an order of service. Now, if you want to keep those changes that we made, remember we added a children's message, we removed a few rubrics. If you want to save those to be used on that same kind of change to be used on another occasion, that's where under this document, this order of service has a save button. If we click save, it's saving this custom order of service. So it says my divine service setting 1. You could say divine service setting 1 changes for resurrection, or we use acronyms RLC, Resurrection Lutheran Church, our fictional church here. If you do that, those changes that you made to the liturgy will be in there next time you use that custom order of service. Now, the things that do change every week, like the hymns, the propers, that'll still update because we didn't mess with those. But everything else will stay in. The rubrics that we deleted will stay deleted. The things that we added will be added. So you can put those in there that way and use that same order of service over and over again. So we'll touch on those kind of custom resources tomorrow. That's a big part of the presentation. But I wanted to clarify that. We start with a liturgy, but you make it an order of service, but it's still not a presentation yet. When you add in a format, then you get a presentation. And we do have a format in place right now. It's not a great one. It is our what we call basic presentation format. You can see that in the top left. We have some other ones here. So if I wanted to go in and take this one that I made a while ago, basic modern, I call it, you can see that it changes everything. Now, the one thing, and we'll get into this as we get into formats, it can be a little goofy at first because I'm going from one resolution to another. So you can see how it kind of cuts it off. But on the left-hand side, it looks fine. And if I go click over there, it'll put it in the right place. Now, this is one where I have changed a number of things. You can see there's colors, the background colors changed, the font has changed. These are just different ones that I like. Now, as you click on an element that has the right side, it actually really shrinks it down because it's a wider resolution. It's a 1920 by 1080, you know, that 16 by 9 as opposed to a 4 by 3. If you look at that, you can see just how different it is. You've got all this open space. It doesn't really matter. You still, that search side of things, that search bar is there to help you out, but everything is still the same slide. So going back to this, we started with Divine Service Setting 1. We made our changes to our service. Now we've added a format. That gets us to the presentation. So now when I go to Document and I export it as one of two options, PowerPoint or MediaShout 6. Let's do PowerPoint first. We'll talk about MediaShout in a moment. So I'm going to download this and I'll show you what this looks like. And I want to make sure you can see it because I should have done my full screen and not just my browser, although it is opening elsewhere. Let me bring it over here. Hopefully you can see that. All right, good. There's a lot of questions coming in. I'm not able to look at that right now, but I will get to you during the question and answer session. Tim will be answering those as well. Thank you for all your feedback. All right, so here is our presentation in PowerPoint. Whoops. It looks pretty much exactly the same as it did in Builder. Not the one that we came up with, the one that had the format applied to it. So as we go down here, you can see what it looks like. Now there may be some things that we want to change. So like this, right up here, glory of your name, amen. Oh, we could probably do better than that. So I can go in here, copy this, and paste it back in. Now I can delete this slide. So why did that happen? Well, let's go over to Builder. Oops, wrong one. Where did it go? Here's Builder. Right there. So you'll notice that this is what it looks like in Builder. And if we go, can we split screen it? Ooh, no, we're not gonna be able to split screen. So it goes all the way to the end and your ways to the. Now in PowerPoint, it changes it to your ways to the right here. It actually expanded it down an additional line. Why is that? Well, it's not an exact science. PowerPoint is reading the export that we send out, but it's a digital file that we interpret and PowerPoint interprets, and we try to interpret it in the exact same way, but it doesn't always work out that way. And we try to fix it when we can, but PowerPoint will make tweaks and certainly won't let us know about it, and it reads it differently. And so I encourage you to look through everything, be patient with us because we cannot be perfect. We basically produced an estimate of what PowerPoint will be doing, but it's not a guarantee. And so you have to look through that. It doesn't take too long, but you'll see that, just like before, we had this box here and a separate box on a different page. It doesn't flow through that. So I encourage you, after you export it, to go and look at each thing. It's not always going to be perfect, but we try to get it as close as possible. All right, here's another thing. So that is how the music looks on there. And it doesn't look terrible, but you can see that it's certainly smaller than what we have on text. Now you can go through and resize it, make it bigger, but these are all images. And so as you stretch it, it's gonna look worse. We'll talk about that in the formats and how things could change. Now, something like this, where it says sit. Well, you might want to say, please be seated. That's a little bit better. And you may not want it on a separate slide. So you can take this text box, I'm shrinking the text box down, we'll cut it, and we'll put it down here. Now I've just removed another slide and put it right after the salutation and the collect. So you might want to make those tweaks. I encourage you to do that. They're not hard to do, but it's things that are very subjective. We can't always get that that's what you want. Something like this, where you have a hymn with multiple stanzas that are short. You could put more than one on a slide. Not all hymns are like that. So you've got to make those calls individually. And that's where we recommend you do it here. Here's an example where the words of Christ in red probably don't work with that template so well. All right, let's go back into Builder and talk briefly here under Document, Export to Media Shout 6. Media Shout 6, or I should say Media Shout, is a software that allows you to present in a variety of different ways. There's a lot of additional features to it. You can bring in music and other things. It's more powerful than PowerPoint. It's also more expensive than PowerPoint. And they've actually recently released a Media Shout 7 about a year ago. Well, they were very helpful as we planned for Media Shout 6. We've had less luck with them as we look at Media Shout 7. We haven't pushed them too hard because a lot of our churches haven't moved on to it. In fact, we find that a lot of them aren't using Media Shout in general. So it's something we're considering. I'd be curious, if you use Media Shout 7, please put a note in the chat. It would just be kind of an informal poll to see who's using it. All right, we're gonna jump into the presentation formats. You'll see that we started off with a really, in my opinion, lame basic format right there, white and black. We went into a presentation format that I've created. I call it my modern one. It just has some more modern colors, modern fonts. It's adjusting to a different, more modern, I hate to use the word modern, although more common screen resolution. It's a wide screen, which is, again, more common. So the way that you get to it, you've got two options. You can either click this edit button by presentation formats, or you can go to the setting cog and click presentation formats. We'll just go here. So underneath presentation formats, you've got a list, and you can have as many of these as you want. And it's not like it's bogging down the server. They're very basic things. You can have one for every week if you wanted to, and some churches do that. We'll click on basic. Oops. So this is, we'll go through the features first, and then we'll create one. So very similar to bulletin formats. You've got your options here. You've got your preview in the middle, your three tabs, style, layout, and content. Down at the bottom, you have a new format, and you will always be basing it off of an existing format, either basic or iron. Now, iron is very much thematic to Lutheran Service Book. It's got gray on the background. It's got the imagery in here. I really don't like this one. I find it hard to read, but to each their own. Now you can change things on here, but there's an image in the background. So there's very little you can do. Like, I'd love to be able to change it so it's not gray so that the words are easier to read. But the background is that. I like the symbols, but I can't change the background color. So that's okay. We're not going to get into that too much, but you can base it off of basic or iron. You can copy or delete a format. If you want to copy it and then make a tweak to it for a different week, great. Over on the far right, you have your reset and save. So I'll reset this view, and then I don't have to save it because I didn't save any changes. All right, so let's go back to basic. That's a little bit easier to see right now. All right, so we've got on the style, this deals with your colors, your fonts, all of that. It's your basic style guide kind of thing. Your layout is very simple. It's what size and how your margin should be. And then your content. So your content says how things should show by default. You can override it at a service level, and we did some of that already, but this is how it should show by default. So let's go one by one. Style. Background, color, image, you can do that, or you just leave it white. I would recommend looking at where you're projecting before you choose a background color. You're either going to do a light background with dark text or a dark background with light text in front of it. And again, it's very subjective. My opinion, and I've heard this from others, so I'm not just making this up, is that it depends on if you are projecting onto something or projecting from something. Meaning, do you have a projector that points the light onto the screen? Or do you have a projector, or do you have like a TV, a giant large screen TV, where the light is backlit and it's going towards people? That changes how the light is handled. And I can't get into the specifics because I'm just not that knowledgeable on it. But the rule of thumb that I like to use that I've heard from others is that if you are using a TV where it's backlit, go with a dark background and a light text. And if you are projecting onto something, then go the reverse like this. I find in general, I typically like seeing things whether it's backlit or frontlit. I like the dark background and the light text, but that's my personal opinion. On my phone, I have it all in dark mode. That's backlit. So it's really up to you. But today we're going to create one that is dark on the background, and the basic modern one that I did was dark with the different colors, the lighter colors on the front. We're going to go kind of middle of the road here. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change my background color, and I'm going to create it as more of a dark gray, but we're going to go with lighter text on there. Let's go even darker, actually. And we're going to go with more of a bluish background. There we go. So that's hard to read with black. Well, yeah, it is. We're going to make it white text. Now, if you wanted to bring in an image, we'll look at that in a few minutes. All right, now your sections. You've only got 5 options here. You've got your body, heading, caption, rubrics, and copyrights. So this here is a heading. So this heading, as we click on it, we're going to go a little bit modern. There's a font that I like to use. I don't know exactly how to pronounce it. It's a Google font. It's K-A-S-H-A-N script, Caution script. So if I do that, it gives me a little bit more of a modern feel. I think it's still readable, not the color. We'll get to that in a second. But I don't need it underlined, and I probably want it bigger. And then let's see here. We'll change it to the white text. That's much easier to read. We could always do it as kind of a lighter pink, add a little bit of color to it, or we could do it like a lighter blue, kind of like that. And then we could do a lighter pink color for the rubrics since it's more in the red. And we could go centered. And if we wanted to, we could add space around it. That doesn't really make much sense for the heading. It's always going to be on one screen. All right, now let's go down here to our caption. I'm going to do something very similar. Now, I should point out with the fonts, you have to have the font installed on your computer for it to be visible here. We cannot inspect your computer to see what fonts you have. We can guess based on what you've imported in and what is standard to your type of computer. And that's what this is here, is our guesses. They are not guaranteed to be on your computer. And you'll see it if it's not working right, but we take pretty good guesses. But if there's one on your computer that we don't know about, that you know about, like this Caution script, you can do that. So I can go and type in caution on script. I got to get it exactly right. But once I type it in, it's after each character, it's querying your computer, say, is this a valid font? Is this a valid font? And once you get it right, then it is, and it can show that. So now I've got this. I'm going to keep it at that kind of bluish color, a little bit lighter, and it matches that. It's a little bit darker, but I kind of like that distinction. All right, so the one thing, and I've talked to our team about possibly adding where you could put in a very specific color as opposed to just pointing and clicking. We may do that in the future. But here, I want to add a little bit of spacing. Give me some breathing room. There we go. Now let's get into body. That's what the hymns is. And this will be a little bit different. I'm going to more of a modern today. I'm going to go with open sans. You know, you can make it darker. Actually, yeah, I think that's good enough. I'm going to go a little bit larger though. I'll go to 44, and I want to keep it white. All right, that's not bad at all. We may have to adjust that when we adjust our resolution, but I think this is looking pretty good for right now. And then we've got our copyright line down here. So we'll go to copyright. I'm going to type in that same thing, open sans. And we're going to create that as kind of a gray, a light gray. You can still read it. And I'm going to just put it in the center right there. All right, that's looking good. Now we've got our rubrics. If we go here to rubric, I'm going to put that under open sans as well. I got to type it right. I'm going to center it. I'm going to make it a light pink. Keep it in that red color scheme. I'm going to take off the italics. Well, maybe I will keep the italics in, but I'm not going to have it be bold. Maybe I'll go up a little bit more. We'll do 48. There we go. So you can see I'm starting to get a more modern look to it using a couple different fonts. I think I'm going to go with a slightly different background color. We're going to make it a little bit darker. Not quite chocolate color, but that'll make it stand out a little bit more. All right, now let's go to our layout. The layout says, what size do you want it? Well, this is going to be based on whether your presentation format is a widescreen or a TV. I can't tell you which one to go with because the one to go with is the space that you have allotted. You have a lot of different options, but I'm going to go with a 1080 height and a 1920 width. And you'll notice that I'm starting to go off the screen. This is where we're going to save it. So I didn't create a new one, so I'm going to save it under basic. And let's switch back and forth. Sometimes when you change it, it doesn't go right. I would just recommend refreshing. So I'm going to hit Control F5. That's going to refresh my screen and reset everything. That happens from time to time. It's not a big deal. Now you can see it. That makes it a lot better. What that does do, though, is tell me I need to go and increase my font sizes. So let me go back here. Here's my heading. Make that 124. Here's my caption. We're going to make that 72. Here's my body. We're going to make that 96. Ooh, too much. Let's make that 72 as well. And there's my caption, or sorry, copyright. We'll make that 44. And there's my rubric. We'll make that 72 as well. All right, that's looking a little bit better. I may adjust some spacing a little bit on my caption. You could tinker with this all day, and I often do. All right, let's go to the layout again. We made our size, but now we're really up tight against the edge. 20 was fine when our pixels were smaller, but let's go up to like 50 pixels all the way around. And you can see that it'll start to push things a little bit. You've got some options here in terms of like your body. Do you want to condense it a little bit? That's not too bad. Yeah, I like where that's looking. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and save that now. And so there's my layout. The last thing we have under here is content. Now this goes back to what do you want to display and how based on the type of elements it is. So we have confession, absolution here. You may not want to have a header image. So the work we did to make this look nice, we may just say don't include any headers whatsoever, and it'll never show those slides. It's different than in the bulletin where it just kind of moves the line. This is cutting down on slides, and if you're not using the slide or you're just kind of going through it quickly, then it might be better to just exclude it. Now rubrics are a tough one. You might want some rubrics and not others. Sometimes you might want the rubric on another slide and you're just manually typing that in. That's your call, but you could turn off all rubrics. Now, as we get into hymns, do you want the content to be the text or the music? Well, this is what the music looks like. And the music goes the full width, which when you have a wider screen, it's a little bit larger. So maybe you want to include that there. Now you'll see here that it cuts off the copyright line. That'll change. You can adjust those things when you export. This is just the preview. Then you've got the caption placement. Do you want it on every side or the first slide or a separate slide? So you could do this. This gives you a little bit more space. Start off with that. And when you start singing, you go here. That's kind of your call. I'm going to say just on the first slide. And then caption format, do you want the name or do you want the role, hymn of invocation? Do you want both? Well, that could make some adjustments to you. That's kind of up to you. I usually go with just the name. And then do you want to show stanza numbers or not? Well, that's actually just for text. You'll see that shows the difference there. Usually, if you're not showing a hymnal at all, or you're not pulling from a hymnal, I would include the stanza numbers. All right, we'll keep it at that because I like the text. Then the liturgy, do you want the liturgy visible? Probably. Do you want to sing or not sing? Well, that's a choice at your church. And do you want it to be text or, you can still sing with just the text, but do you want to show the melody, or in some cases, you can get the 4 parts. Again, that's your call. I would keep it consistent. So as you go through here, I would look at it and try to make it the same each time. Now here you can have symbols or text. I recommend the symbols, but that's my personal preference. And then the propers, as you go through that, do you want them to be visible or not? Liturgy and no, propers is where I was at. Everything jumped up. All right, so there's the gradual. Do you want the music in? There you go. Do you want it? How do you want the caption? First slide is probably enough. Caption format, again, roll, both, Holy Gospel. That's your call. There's the chant pointing option, the verse number options for the readings, the headers, like the ESV headers, and then the words of Christ in red. Now, let's see here. We'll take it. This is one where I wouldn't want to show the words in Christ in red. It's just going to clash. So what I encourage you to do is put together your ideal presentation format, play with those different options, see what it looks like on the preview, and then apply it to a service. And that's what we're going to do here. We're going to save this, we're going to close out, and we're going to go see what our service looks like. Go back to third Sunday of Easter. Go to prepare presentation, and because I saved this as basic, it's going to automatically put that in my new format. And we're going to give it a second. It's having to take my new settings and reapply it. So I apologize for the wait. Oops, never mind. Here we go. Now we'll go to basic. And if you ask me, this doesn't look too bad. Uh-oh. So here's something. We've never had cash-on script in there before. So that what it's telling me is it is now learning that font. It is looking at the pixels and it is calculating where it should split the different slides. So as we do that, it's going to take a second, but now this font will be used for everybody. So I've used this elsewhere before, but apparently not in Builder like I thought I had. So it's going to take a second, but if you see that, if you see this happening, that means that you are the first person to ever use this font, and it's going to remember it for the next person, whether it's me or somebody in another church using that same exact font. All right, while that does that, I'm going to take a quick breather. We've got a lot of questions to get through, but that's okay. I'm happy to stick around and answer them. Well, I'm sorry, I would have done this beforehand if I knew how long this was going to take. Scripts are a little bit harder to estimate. What Builder's doing is it's reviewing every single character, measuring it, and like I said, it's a game of pixels. So it's going through all of it to determine exactly how it should split it up when we use this font. So we are almost done. Thank you for your patience as it goes through that. And again, once it learns it for one, it learns it for everybody. All right, we'll give it another second here. I'll take a look at the questions just to see what's come up. All right, here we go. Well, that's looking pretty good if you ask me. Yeah, I like how that looks. So now I can go and download it. It's done a pretty good job of splitting this up. There's a few little tweaks that we might have to adjust. Let's go ahead and download that. We'll give that a second. There we go. Now, remember, I have this font on my computer, and so that'll work for me. But if I share this file with somebody else who doesn't have that font on their computer, it may not work for them. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. I probably didn't need to center the caption or the copyright line. So now I can go and make whatever modifications I want. So like here, after absolution, maybe I don't want it to say stand. Maybe I want to say, please stand if you are able. And you see, I don't know if it's probably pretty small, but I've got this box around it. If I shrink the box down and then I hit Control X, I'll cut it. I can paste it here. And then I can remove this slide. So I can make these adjustments. It doesn't really change the service. It's certainly not affecting Builder at all. So if I make these adjustments and then I re-export this, I'm gonna have to make them again. So you wanna go through and get your presentation looking as good as possible in Builder as part of your presentation format, as part of your order of service, so that by the time you get to your PowerPoint, you have to make as few as possible. So like here, we've got some weirdness going on. That one probably should have been able to move up there. There's something going on with my margins. All right, well, we are past time now. It's 11:18. I plan to go to 11:15, so I'm not too late. Only 3 minutes, better than yesterday. And let me make sure, yeah, we did get through all of my different things. Well, actually, one thing I do want to show before, since we got a lot of questions, but I meant to show one other thing. We looked at a bad example of an image in the background, in my opinion. And I say that it's a default setting, but I don't think it reads as well. But there's some other options like this here. This is what we call a digital pyramid. This came from our creative worship library. And I think this looks really good. I say that I didn't design the image. The image looks awesome. I did design this format, but this is a great presentation for Lent, and it really conveys that tone. And in this image here is just the whole thing is an image in the background. And so that's one of those things you can get with creative worship. And so here's another example of it where it's just a texture in the background. Now you can achieve something very similar with just flat colors. Here's one I made that has different fonts. That one might be a little bit too big of a font. But yeah, I encourage you to look at your different options. Come up with something that works well for you in your church. And the image size, just so I say this, should be the same size as your layout, exact same size. That's what works best. You can upload a different size, but it may stretch it, it may crop it. Make sure it's the exact same size. All right, now I'll go back in here. So before we get into question and answers, if there is a question that you have, maybe you're watching this recording after the fact. If there's a question you have and you can't ask it right now, there's a number of ways you can do it. You can go to our online help center. Again, that is in the lowercase I down here, in the lower right corner. You can go and search for it. You could also start an in-app chat. That is also down here. You see start a chat. You can also send us a message. Now you can email us directly at support@cts.cph.org, or you can go down here to send us a message. And it gives you a little form to fill out. And finally, you'll see this phone number right down here. You can also just call us at 800-346-6120. We're open Monday through Friday, 7:30 to 5. Tim is one of our support techs. He's on the line answering questions right now in the chat. He might be answering your phone call, or he might be the one you chat with in-app. So you've got a whole team of people who are supporting you on that side of things. All right, so that is the last, that's number 3. We'll move into number 4 tomorrow, My Worship Resources. If there's questions related to what we're presenting tomorrow, I'm going to defer those questions to that, because there's a lot that we can get into tomorrow with the My Worship Resources. And that, if it's like the last 2 days, a lot of the questions revolve around that. So today we're going to talk about anything that was related to presentations and presentation formats. So as you go through, please type your questions into the GoToWebinar chat. Remember, a recording will be emailed within 48 hours. You don't have to ask how you get it. If you're here or if you registered, we'll email you a link to the recording, hopefully today, maybe tomorrow. And then finally, if you're watching this as a recording, please send your questions to support@cts.cph.org or use any of the other 3 options I showed a minute ago. So I'm going to pause for a second. First off, you don't have to stay for the questions. If you want to go and start an early lunch, or maybe it's a late lunch if you're on the East Coast, please go ahead and do that. But I'm happy to stick around to answer all the questions. So thank you very much for attending. I'm going to pause for a second, take a drink. This hour and a half of talking has been drying my throat out each day. So pardon me while I do that, and I'll start looking at your questions so that I can answer them. All right, let's see here. We've got a good number, and it looks like most of them have been answered by Tim. It's so wonderful having Tim on the line to do that. So I'm going to go up at the top and kind of work my way down. Yeah, I'm sorry again about the issues with the poll. All right, so the first one. Is this strictly for the follow the bouncing ball churches? Phil asked that one. He has already left, so I can't answer him directly, but no, it's not. There are a lot of churches that use presentations in a variety of ways. And like I mentioned, you might be doing live streaming and you might want to have that on there. We do a presentation style format for the hymns alone. And then when we're live streaming, we split screen and show the liturgy, which was exported out of the bulletin format, saved as a PDF, and we show that on screen. So it might be a both and. All right. Are you able to export a presentation to ProPresenter? Don is asking that question. And Don, that's a great question. We get that quite a bit. ProPresenter is a common presentation tool. They have a proprietary export format, and we haven't been able to get them to work with us in a way that is helpful so that we can export in that manner. Now, I'm told that you can export to a PowerPoint and import it into ProPresenter, and there's some work you have to do to get it. We'd like to do that at some point. It's a minority of our customers who use ProPresenter, so we haven't prioritized that in development. And like I said, when we tried to work with them a couple of years ago when we first started, they were less than helpful. So it might be better today. We might have a better way of asking, but it hasn't come up on our development priorities yet. But I will be sure to share that with the team because we do get that question from time to time. All right. So we don't use creative worship. Is there a way to reorder the right column so the service plan is at the top of the list? Oh, yes, Bill. And Tim answered this too. If you don't use creative worship, it'll always be at the top of the list. Creative worship only shows up if you are subscribed to it and you want it to show in search results. I'll show that tomorrow, but you shouldn't have that showing up for you if you don't use creative worship. All right, can the text in the melody sheet be changed? Emmanuel Lutheran Church is asking, and unfortunately it cannot. And I say that because, I say unfortunately because I could see why you might want to rearrange it or change the size, change the font. But as as it's been explained to me by the music team, and working with them now for going on close to 5 years, they are excellent and I trust them. They tell me it is more of an art than a science, and I get it. When they show me how they engrave images, it is truly creating an image. Engraved hymns, I should say, is creating an image, and so it'd be just like a banner or any other image where you'd have to go and modify it that way. It's not a point and click kind of text thing unless you're using that specialized software. So that's why when you use Melody, it exports it out into an image format, and that can't be changed. Looks like 16:9. Do you change ratio in PowerPoint? We showed that already in the presentation format, so this was a bit before I did that. All right, can you put the entire melody, all stanzas on one slide? Linda is asking that. And Linda, that's a really good question. This is where it goes into the splitting up. Most stanzas are going to be too long to have, or depending on how you do it. If you have two, you could probably fit that in. Maybe you could shrink the images down. This is, I think you said, yeah, you said, can you put the entire melody, all stanzas on one slide? That's where it starts going in, and I can show you. Let's jump back into Builder, close out of this, close out of this. We'll give that a second. Yeah, we'll definitely be going past 11:30 because there's a lot of questions, but there's a lot of really good ones in here. Uh-oh, did my screen freeze? Here we go. Let's switch this to melody so you can see what this hymn looks like. So you have here one stanza split over two slides because of where the melody is. You would have to shrink those horizontally to fit into one slide, which is going to shrink the text quite a bit. You can't do that in Builder. Builder always goes the full width to make it as large as possible, but you can do that in PowerPoint. I don't recommend it because it's going to be hard to read. And I'm not going to go through that process right now on this one, but I can show you what it looks like when you shrink melody lines. I thought maybe. Don't we have a melody in here at some point? Maybe I do need to export it. I thought I exported it with at least one melody line. I apologize. I did not. We'll go ahead and export that real quickly then. Because I've talked about adjusting images, but I didn't really show it. And this is certainly more of a PowerPoint thing, but I think it'll be helpful for you to see why I recommend against trying to resize it. All right, so this is a very similar but second version of this same one. Let's see. Here we go. Okay, so we have these here. So each one of these is an image, and I could cut these and paste them here. You see that overlay? I can move it down. I can select all of these, and I can start shrinking it down this way. Then you could use the image tools here under picture format, under align, distribute vertically. So you can see they start to go in that same spot. As I drag and drop these in here, I can create more room for myself. I can select them all, go align left, and then under align, I can distribute vertically so they all look the same, but that is pretty small. So I have that entire stanza, all lines on one slide, but it's going to be pretty small if I go to present that. It's your call. Again, it's you can only do what the images allow you to do. If you're going to stretch them like that, it starts to look a little goofy, and that's hard to read. If you're going to make them any bigger, you really can't go too much bigger than what you have. So again, the restrictions are that it's an image. What you'd like to do with it is completely up to you once you export it out. All right, let's keep going. How do you combine slides? Meta has already left, but I think you saw what I just did. You basically cut and paste elements and move them into a different slide. There's not like a combined slide option in there. More centering, horizontal and vertical would be helpful. Typically, it's always vertically centered. And then with the presentation formats, you can horizontally center it. The only difference is on those hymns, and that's because it's trying to combine them as much as possible based on size. Or I shouldn't say that. It's more than hymns. All of the liturgy elements are like that too, but again, the reasoning is the same. It's trying to combine the different elements into as small of a spot as possible, but then it feeds into the next page. All right. Oh, when you select psalm tone, would it be possible to put which one it is? A, B, C for the organist. Yeah, they'll see that. Tim responded, if the organist has access to the account, they'll be able to see it in there. But that's an interesting suggestion. We can include that in feedback. It doesn't do that right now, but I like that idea. Oh, Pam is asking, please define element. Tim answered, about 45 minutes ago, but an element is any specific piece of the worship service or the order of service. So it could be a hymn, it could be a caption, it could be, the invocation, any one of those individual things. The Let Us Pray, how do you subscribe for Let Us Pray and Prayer of the Church? Tim answered in there. I'm going to show you how to do that tomorrow. So that goes beyond the scope for today. Can you change the size of the text? Joan asked that, and I already covered that, so hopefully you have that answer. If you want to include the rubric on the same slide as the distribution caption slide, I showed that has to be in PowerPoint. Rubrics will always show up on their own because it's an individual element, but you can move that once you get out to PowerPoint. I saw a group option pop up in one of the pull downs. Can that be used to group hymn verses to one page? Well, no, that's a different feature, and I showed how to do that in PowerPoint, but let me show you what that group aspect means. That is showing up under, here we go. So in communion, under words, the words of our Lord go across multiple slides. If I was to delete that, I could either delete the words of our Lord, just that section of it, or delete the entire group. That's where group is coming up. So the group is already defined. It's not a verb, it's a noun saying this group of elements. To combine the hymns, I just showed that a moment ago. So I hope that makes sense. What UI are you using? I thought Lutheran Service Builder did away with the desktop client in favor of the online version. So I am using the online version. I am doing full screen in Google Chrome as opposed to doing a showing the browser and the URL. That can be done by hitting F11 on your keyboard, or you can go and do a save as kind of thing. Let's see, if I go here, I've got a different window pulled up. So if I go in here, you'll see I'm going to the exact same thing, but I've got it with the user, with the URL and everything else. In Chrome, they've got this great little thing, save page as, and it creates a desktop icon for me, and then it opens up in full screen every time. So it's just a little trick that I'm doing on my computer. You can do that as well if you're using Google Chrome. All right, the sit or stand direction within the slide before or after, so it does not take up a whole slide. Yeah, I showed that. What does track mean? I have not seen that term in liturgy before. Michelle, I'm right there with you. I looked it up one time about a year ago and I completely forgot what it is, so I don't remember either. I'll have to look that up. I'll try to remember to look that up by tomorrow. I can't promise you that I'll remember to do that, but yes, I don't remember what that means. All right, can you only export to PowerPoint or Media Shout? We currently use Pro Presenter. I think I already covered that. It's easy to adapt from PowerPoint, but we prefer the full Adobe Acrobat. I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to, Tony. It's probably in response to Tim. So I'm going to move on from that. Apple users would say that Keynote is better than PowerPoint and free with Mac computers. Yep, Jonathan, I think our developers would agree with that. Tim said that too. The PowerPoint format is more universally accepted. You should be able to bring PowerPoint into Keynote without any problems whatsoever. I don't remember exactly what file format Keynote uses, but if I remember correctly from our development cycle about 4 years ago, it was very restricted in terms of how we could export to Keynote. It might be different now, but yeah, PowerPoint should work going into Keynote. All right. Richard says you can change the color of the words, highlight and change. That is in PowerPoint, not in Builder. All right. Jonathan says, I ask because the ribbon in the webinar seems quite unlike what I'm seeing. I think you're using the desktop version then. All right, what was done in formats to get 2 verses on 1 page? That was just changing the font size. That's all it was. If the font is too large to allow for 2 verses to be on one slide, then it'll split them up. If the font is small enough and the entire stanza can fit on the same slide, then it'll combine them. All right, which style item adjusts copyright distance from the hymn text? That is a really good question, Patricia. So that is under presentation formats. And I will clarify that it is not specifically about the distance between the hymn text and the copyright, but it is about the spacing of each of those individual elements, if that makes sense. Why is that taking a second to load? All right, so you'll see here there's enough spacing from it. If I go into copyright, I could put some text above where I can change the line height. And then you also have like margins, which will adjust where it shows. It'll push it up. So what I would recommend is adjusting those things. And that will change, you know, like body. If you have spacing before or after that, you can change the font size. You can eventually cover over that, but because I have a good line height here, pushes it down. So it's just that combination of line height, spacing before, spacing after, this whole paragraph section here. Play around with it for both body and copyright to get what you're looking for. All right, we'll keep going. I like to use text and bulletin presentation for liturgical response, and if they are sung response, I use musical note symbol to warn the congregation they're about to sing. Tony, that's a really good idea. That you can add a little icon in PowerPoint or something like that if you don't want to have the full melody. So we've seen that Lutheran Service Builder generates a PowerPoint presentation. Does Lutheran Service Builder generate a bulletin, a Word, or just a Word document that the user then has to format as a bulletin? That was yesterday. So Jonathan, I didn't realize you weren't here yesterday. You can get to that in our Resource Center, and this would be a good time to show that actually. Let me pull up my browser because I haven't shown that yet. If you go to resources, whoops, resources.concordia, let me get out of all caps, resources.concordiatechnology.org. This is where you have lots of great things. You can go under software and Lutheran Service Builder. And here are the ones from yesterday and Monday. And then later on today, hopefully, or tomorrow at the latest, you will see today's webinar. So resources.concordiatechnology.org. All right, next up. How easy will this import into the Easy Worship software? We use Easy Worship as our projection software. We also eventually by using a video wall rather than a projector. Any thoughts on that? I can't say, Beverly. I have not used Easy Worship before, so I can't say. I would guess or hope that it would import a PowerPoint file. Most presentation softwares import PowerPoint, which is why we export to that, because it's more of a universal file format. So even though it's called PowerPoint, it can be imported into other software. All right, Connie has already left, but she thanked us for the webinars. I'm hoping that's helpful to everybody. All right, let's keep going. Do you have any videos or webinars on how to integrate this into a Zoom or Facebook live stream? We'd be bouncing back and forth between seeing the live stream and then seeing the presentation. Stephanie, actually I do in this resource center. So if you go to home, how to live stream at your church for the first time. I did a video and then I also did a blog post about this. You can, it's not specifically about Lutheran Service Builder, but it's about presenting. So one of the cool things within PowerPoint, let me go back in here, is that you can go and you can file save as, and you can change, we'll go to my desktop here. You can save it as a JPEG. And so that opens up even more options. You can do a PowerPoint using live streams. We use OBS. There's a number of different streaming studios, but you can save this as a JPEG, and then it'll say all slides are just this one. If you do all slides, you'll get all of these slides as individual images, and that makes it a lot easier. But you can also, if you have a PowerPoint, you need two monitors, and you do what's called a window capture. And you capture that second monitor, and then you can toggle back and forth. We do that at my church for Bible studies. So yes, you can. I can't go in great detail there, but I encourage you to go to our resource center, take a look at the blog post. Let me know what kind of questions you have afterwards. All right, Dawn says, once it's sent to PowerPoint, oh yeah, you can use the PowerPoint formats that they have. That is another good suggestion. If you go in the PowerPoints, there we go. You could go into, what is it, design, and change the formats. Now you have to find one that looks good, but you can utilize formats and you can save these in there and reuse them again and again. We try to keep the same styles that PowerPoint uses so you can take advantage of what they do there. So yeah, I just changed it in PowerPoint. Now, Builder is going to look the same, and you can't import these into Builder, but you've got a lot of options once you get to PowerPoint. All right, Wayne's asking how to change speaker IDs. That'll be covered tomorrow, so I'm not going to get into that now. More frustrating to me is, here we go, this is from Jonathan, is the Builder search. I click on the magnifying glass and a search sidebar appears. I type in something. Yeah, Jonathan, you're asking about search. We covered that the other day. I will say though, if you are going up into this global search, we'll close this, give it a second to close. The magnifying glass on the global search, well, actually, I think you're probably going here, but if you were on something like the global search, that is just helping you see what's available, but it's not going to apply it to your service. And you mentioned proper preface. Yeah, lots of things will come up, but there's a lot of ways to filter down your search. So I encourage you to go watch session 1. We covered search in great detail there. All right. When music and words on slides, Donna is asking, when music and words on 2 slides, I start a new slide with a new sentence. Yeah, that's a good rule of thumb. All right, Jonathan had some more questions on that. Can't get into that today. I missed how you were able to get the scripture references to show up for the propers the way it does by default when preparing bulletins. Stan, it doesn't do that. You cannot get the scripture references to show up by default in presentations. So you'll notice that when you are in a presentation format, and you're modifying it, go to content, go down here, there is no subcaption, and subcaption is where you do that in the in the bulletins. The reason for that is because of the way that PowerPoint works and the way it layers things on top of it. We could not accurately place a subcaption in the same way that we can in Word. And that's just the nature of the beast. And so we have not included that because we don't have a way of doing it. Now, there might be other ways that we haven't considered, but at least for right now, we've excluded that because we can't do it in the same way or in a helpful way at all. So you didn't miss it. I didn't cover it because we can't do it. Sorry. Jonathan, going back to your comment on search, you say, I know I'm doing it wrong, but I'm appealing to you to improve the search engine. I think it'd be best to reach out to support after you watch the training, because I think the training will help you in more details. All right, we'll keep going. Easy Worship will import a PowerPoint. Jenny, thanks for letting me know. I haven't used Easy Worship, but I'm glad to hear. I expected it did. All right. Legally, does the copyright information have to be on the screen so long, or does it have to be big in our bulletin? For example, it's like a 6-point font. No, so going to the copyright information, we recommend including it down here on the slide, so just enough that it is legible. And then at the very end, whoops, let me go back into my presentation. That last slide, typically what I've seen people do is they will put it, at the very end, maybe at the end of the benediction. So, or, put it right underneath that final one. It doesn't have to be up there long, but especially if you were like streaming your services, you want to have that at the very end. Typically, there's not too much in here. You could even put this, right at the beginning and just be done with it. But yeah, we do want you to include it just to cover your bases. All right. All right, can hymn title be hymn of the day, hymn name, in the right margin, the number? Sue's asking that. I think this will be our last question for today. So can hymn title be hymn of the day, hymn name, and in the right margin, the number? Not exactly like that. We'll go back to presentation formats. Oops. We'll go over to content, and we'll go to hymns. The caption format, you can have role and then the hymn number and the title, but you can't use that space over there. That goes into that subcaption area. So we have it included in here. We're looking at giving you the option to remove the numbers. That's not available right now, but to get something in the right margin, that has to be manually done. And again, that goes back to us not being able to programmatically do it accurately every time. So that's it. I wish I could give a better answer than that. There's probably a creative solution we haven't thought of yet, and we'll continue to think about that. But your feedback helps. Knowing that that's something you want helps raise it up on our level of priorities. All right, that was the last question, I think. If I missed your question, I apologize. Hopefully Tim got it. I tried to go down one by one. The question experience on my end is not that easy to use, so it's very possible that I missed your question. But that we will leave it there so that I'm not wasting your time while I scroll through it again. So thank you so much for watching. I invite you to come back tomorrow for our very last presentation, My Worship Resources. We got a lot of things to cover. So that'll be 2 hours. I'm planning 90 minutes for presentation. It may go over that. I'm going to try to streamline it as much as possible, but there's a lot of cool things that we're going to cover. So once again, thank you for being here. Special shout out to Tim from our support team. Thank you so much for answering those questions. That means that everybody can get the answer, even if they have to leave before the Q&A time. So once again, thank you very much. Have a great rest of the day. We'll see you tomorrow.